Welcome to the Ben and Lauren Show. Here we are. Another night, Saturday night. What time is it? Like 11 o'clock?
Oh, it's late. We got the kids to bed early enough, but then we spent an hour talking about what we should talk about.
And the conclusion we came to was we had a very boring week.
It was so boring that we're not even sure it's worth talking about it.
Well, we were thinking maybe we can talk about the garden.
We've done that already.
But we did that already. We're going to talk about dandelion wine. Talked about that already. Talk about going to the grocery store. How exciting.
We're still confined because we're still contagious from this virus that will not go away.
Oh yeah, and we can talk about sickness the whole.
Right, we could, but that's why part of why our week was really so quiet is because we're not going anywhere right now. We did actually have to go a few places this week.
So the big event this week was that on Thursday, I went on a trip across the state to the left side of Michigan.
That's what the kids call it.
The left side of Michigan, up in Luddington. And it's about a, 4-hour drive out there? And it was a day trip. Basically got up in the morning, 4 hours there, did everything I needed to do, and then came back 4 hours later. But what was unusual is that I did it by myself.
We were originally going to go with him. In fact, we were discussing going with him right as Daniel got sick. That kind of interrupted the plans because if we can't take the kids anywhere, can't take them in anywhere, basically it would have been a whole trip with just putting all our kids in the car for 8 hours and then coming home.
Mm-hmm.
And
really, if we're going to take the family, we'd have to make like a day out of it. Drive out there, get a hotel, and then drive back the next day.
yeah, I don't know at this point how feasible it would be to take everybody for a whole trip in the car. I mean, you and I could do that, or you and I and a small baby could do that.
Mm-hmm.
But with all the kids, that would be a really long day.
But it was nice seeing Lake Michigan. We're used to seeing Lake Huron and sometimes Lake Erie and a lot of Lake St. Clair, but not Lake Michigan.
Lake Michigan is fun because on that side of the state, they actually have sand on their beaches. On our side of the state, it's just rocks.
It's all rocks.
A little bit of sand sometimes.
But mostly rocks.
Mostly just rocky.
Doesn't feel good on your feet.
It's colder. On that side of the state, the water is a different color and it can look real tropical and very pretty.
Unless you go up to Tobermory, then it's very tropical looking.
Cold.
But it's cold.
Yeah. And that day, that was Wednesday, it wasn't a real pleasant day to be out. It was kind of windy and rainy.
Was it Wednesday or Thursday? It was Thursday.
It was Thursday, you're right.
Yeah.
It was Thursday you went to Luddington.
So I got up early. Well, early for me. We're not early people. Got out the door by 7. They're probably saying, early? What are you talking about? But I got out the door by 7, and I was running a bit late, but I managed to get there semi-on time. But it was so strange. Getting up and the house is so quiet. No one's moving, no noises, no sounds, just dark, just really strange. And so I hopped in the car and just started driving.
Ben hasn't really gone on any trip like that anywhere by himself, I think, since we were first seeing each other.
So it's been over 7 years since I've
Because
done.
if he's not going with Dad, then I go with him.
I'm either with my dad or I'm with my family. So it was a very surreal kind of trip.
It was a little odd.
And there's a couple things I had to keep focused. I noticed that I got distracted very easily, focused on driving, you know. And I had to be careful not to fiddle with my phone too much because it's not safe to be texting or doing whatever on the phone while you're driving. And if I'm relying on that for my entertainment, then I just had to get used to not being entertained. Because traveling's not about having something entertain you. It's about focusing on the road and thinking. That's really what traveling's about. I mean, yeah, you can have music or whatever, but, you know, it's not like when you're sitting on a chair looking at a phone.
We actually had a pretty nice day while you were gone.
The weather was nice.
The weather was nicer here, I think. It was warmer. It was warm and sunny here. It was
It
cloudy in
rained.
the morning.
It
But
rained.
then the kids got up fairly early that day also, and they got all their schoolwork done by lunchtime, and I'm trying to get everybody back into a normal routine. Got totally upended for a few weeks there. I guess Mom has been asking Abigail frequently whether we were back to doing schoolwork or not.
Well, we are now, right?
I felt a little bad about that, but anyway, yes, they're back to doing their schoolwork, and so then I had promised them they could make cupcakes after lunch because Elena got a cupcake kit from my mom for her birthday. And the trouble is, when we make cupcakes, a box cake mix makes 24 cupcakes, and I'm not eating them, and Ben will eat one, but it takes, 4 little kids a long time to eat 24 cupcakes.
That's why you put them in the freezer.
Well, they gave some to your mom and dad,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave an extra one for Addie. And
Yeah, you give them away.
yeah, we've had cupcakes for dessert twice, and I asked them if they wanted some more tonight, and they're like, not cupcakes again. Can we get popcorn?
So this is unrelated, but you also took the girls to the office.
I took Daniel and Elena to the doctor's office this
That's
week.
right.
They had how much of the story? We didn't have a pediatrician for quite some time because our kids were never sick.
Mm-hmm.
And since we had our babies at home and our kids were never sick, there never seemed to be a reason to get a pediatrician. But then we had one instance where one of our kids got really, really sick, and we considered taking her to the emergency room.
We played it out through our mind. How is that going to go?
And we realized that when they asked, who's your doctor, we would say we don't have a doctor. And that would not go over well because in this day and age, you are expected to have a doctor. And right now, we don't even have a general family doctor. And we have not needed one for 7 years. We haven't even done urgent care. I mean,
Thankfully.
we've been very, very healthy. When we get sick, we get better. There hasn't been any reason to go.
It's funny, we've been very, very healthy, but we've been sick for the past 3 weeks.
Well, that was just weird. So anyway, we had this pediatrician recommendation, and we really like her. But when we went, we kind of interviewed her, and she interviewed us, and she said, well, I'd be happy to be your pediatrician, but here's the deal. I don't want you to show up once every 5 years when somebody has a problem or you need something. I won't know who you are. I won't know your kids. I won't know anything about you. If you want to be part of the practice, I'd like to see the kids once a year. And we said, well, that's fair.
Yeah. Once a year we can handle.
So we had our once-a-year checkup for the 2 littlest kids, and I was going to postpone it because I didn't want to take them into the office when they could get other people sick.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were contagious.
I asked the receptionist, can I I'd rather not bring them in. She said, well, the soonest I can get you in is October 2nd.
I said, never mind.
Like, October 2nd, and now I'm thinking, well, that's going to run right into the due date for our baby.
Yeah.
We missed that one, too. So
June, July, August,
So
September,
I
October.
took them in, and I was really careful. I had them only sit on my lap in the waiting room, and so that was kind of interesting because so Ben took a trip out to Luddington by himself, which he's never done, and I took 2 kids to the doctor by myself, which I've never done.
And we went to get groceries without any children.
Well, we've done that before.
It felt like a date.
Yeah, so doctor's appointment, we found out that Daniel is huge.
He's a big boy.
He's big. He's probably going to be quite tall.
I'm going to be looking up to him someday.
It's funny, he's tall like my dad, but he's built like Ben's dad, which pretty much turns him into a football player.
Yep.
He's like a 6'2" bulldog.
When he walks around swinging his arms around, it's like, look out. Here he comes.
And I found out that Elena has a heart murmur, which we didn't know about till now. She didn't have it when she was born. They couldn't tell last visit because she was screaming her head off about having someone listen to her back. So I guess if she still has it next time, the recommendation is to get her cleared by a cardiologist to see if there's anything wrong with her heart.
Hopefully it's nothing.
Well, she's in the 75th percentile or something with growth. She's very active. Her immune system is great. She doesn't show any signs of a heart problem. Thankfully. So, anyway, that was a doctor's appointment.
They ask cognitive questions.
Yeah, I want to ask development questions. How's she developing? The doctor gets to the part where she says, so can she identify some colors? And right about that point, Elena reached into my pocket, and she's got little balls of hair that she carries around, almost like a security blanket. It's my hair. When I take a shower, she gathers it all up and rolls it into a little ball, and she holds it and she sucks her thumb. it, I don't even know how she got.
It's a portable mama.
It's a very unusual habit.
She smells it. Anyway.
But right now the deal is she can only have her hairballs when she's taking a nap, so she stores them in my pocket when she's not sleeping. But anyway, she reached in my pocket to check if they were there while we were at the doctor's office, and she only found a few in there. So right about the point where the doctor says, does she know any colors, she says, Mama, there's only 3 here. I need 2 more because I need to have 5 and I only have 3. And I'm like, yeah, she knows her colors. The doctor's looking at me like, did she just say that she needed 2 more to make 5? And I said, yes. And I said, she reads a little too.
Well, she's not a 2-year-old anymore. She's a 3-year-old. She was very proud.
She's very proud of being a 3-year-old.
She was very proud of being a 2-year-old. Now she's very proud of being a 3-year-old.
Her commentary is getting more and more colorful.
Yeah, she's a funny one.
So yeah, developmentally and physically, I guess our kids are doing fine.
And Daniel can identify body parts.
No, he can identify letters. She goes, can he identify any body parts? And I said, well, he's really good at eyes. I said, Daniel, where's your eye? And he turns around, points to the alphabet chart on the wall, and he goes, eye. I'm like, no, your eye.
Eye.
Yeah.
Our children.
It's funny because normally I don't scrutinize our kids that much. So sitting there trying to examine, well, what does he do? Can he stack 5 blocks on top of each other? You know?
He can knock 5 blocks down.
He can stack them too. But it was funny, the questions. It's like, well, does he feed himself at all? Yes. With a spoon? Well, a spoon and a fork. And all these questions about how they're developing. Well, they all seem to be fine to me.
You wonder how many times people will ask, or they'll ask all these questions about developmental, and they'll have to report, no, they can't do this, no, they can't do that. That's got to be very scary as a mother.
It would be pretty disconcerting.
Because you're watching the development of your child, and you assume everything's on track. When pediatrician comes along and does a little test and says, nope, it looks like they're a bit behind. It could be very scary. I didn't talk until very late.
Your mother was worried.
It probably worried my parents a lot.
Well, I feel like Daniel's behind in speaking, and he seems to be right on target. It's just that our girl spoke really young.
Yeah, Daniel does not really talk. He has a few words that he knows, and he babbles.
He talks a lot in full sentences, and you can't understand a word he says.
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about.
Yes, and he uses inflection, and he uses gestures, and he speaks in sentences. There's a beginning and an end to them.
And he points.
He points.
He likes pointing at things.
Right, but you can't understand him most of the time.
One of these days, we're going to understand him.
Every once in a while, he comes out with a sentence where you can understand what he just said.
Rarely, though, right now. He mostly is it's a lot of guesswork. It's kind of like when you can't hear someone, but you pretend you can hear them, and you try to answer as best you can.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's nice. Yeah.
And you got to be careful doing that because he might be asking you a question.
Who knows? Oh, that's fascinating. Tell me more.
Right. So
that's been our exciting week. Anything else exciting this week? Drove out to Luddington. Did some grocery shopping. I mowed the lawn.
It was a very pleasant week weather-wise. It was really nice. We had all the windows open. It feels like it's finally springtime.
Mm-hmm.
We got some thunderstorms.
Yeah, we had a big thunderstorm today.
Yeah. Mostly, it feels like it's still a week where we're trying to get everything back on track, and I was really happy with the warm weather. If we're going to be home all the time, it's nice to have the weather be warm.
And I think we're in the final stages of this, whatever, sickness.
Well, I wouldn't even say we're sick right now. We're just waiting. We think what we had a contagion time of 2 weeks after you get better.
That's a long time.
If we're correct about what we got.
That's a long time, especially because the symptoms are over 10 days or more.
Right. We think it's going to be about a month from when we first got sick to when we're going to be right back to being not contagious.
And it's tempting just to go on with life as normal. I mean, I was worried about going out to Luddington because if I'm still contagious, I don't want to be spreading this over to the other side of the state, you know. But I was very careful. I washed my hands and, you know.
Well, and you by yourself as an adult are much less likely, especially if you're aware that you
Mhm.
need to be careful. You should be able to conduct normal business to a certain extent.
I didn't eat at any restaurants.
Yeah,
I
if
was
you
just,
could drive through and
I was just doing my best to make sure no one else got whatever I had.
yeah.
And we don't really know if we're still contagious,
We really don't. We're just guessing.
but we're trying to play it safe because we don't want to give this to anyone. This is nasty.
Yeah, this one was bad. So that's why our week was so quiet and we spent so much time at home. Kids spent a lot of time. They keep running over next door because they've been inside with the windows closed up all this time. Now the doors are open, and if they see Nana and Papa in the yard next door, they just want to head next door. It's like, guys, you gotta leave Nana and Papa alone to do whatever they're doing. And Daniel, every summer we have one kid we're teaching not to just take off next door.
Today it was twice. He ran over there.
Thankfully, each summer the kid we were working on the summer before has already gotten it.
Daniel has not gotten it yet.
We're in the middle of Daniel. If the door's open, he takes off
He'll
and
run for it.
he tries to go see Nana and Papa. And then he wants to just hang out on their patio because you know someone else's house is always more fun than your house.
He'll run out the front door if you leave it open.
Yeah, he's an escape issue right now.
He's a free ranger.
Free range kid, yeah.
He is not afraid to walk way down the sidewalk without any parental supervision at all.
I think it was last week that a neighbor called Mom up and said that
Yeah, we talked
Daniel
about
was
that.
in front of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mom thought it was in front of their house, and they're all the way down the street. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that was scary.
It's alarming.
So, we were saying that our week was so boring. Maybe we could just discuss some story that we had in the past.
Well, my trip out to Luddington kind of reminded me of the trip that we went out to Luddington.
It was one of the first things we did together.
So before Lauren and I were married, before we were even engaged, we went on a road trip, just her and I. And you know, looking at it, kind of looking back at it, that seems a little scandalous. You know that we would go on a road trip that was all day, pretty much.
Yeah, I was surprised you suggested it very cavalierly. You said, I'd like to take you with me. I've got to go make this delivery, and it's out to Luddington, and my dad says it would be fun to, stop. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a long drive. And I asked my dad, and I fully expected him to say no.
But he said yes,
He said, well, I don't see any problem with that.
and my dad didn't have a problem with it.
Well,
So we did. The two of us had a road trip out to Luddington.
and in the situation I was raised in, being from a homeschooled family, you would think that our parents, my parents, would be much stricter about things like curfews and wanting to know where their kids are all the time because they're seen as overprotective parents.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing was, I had no curfew. I carried all our family credit cards because I did the grocery shopping. I had a lot of freedom that, oddly enough, a lot of people who go to school didn't have. Of course, at the time I was 28 years old.
So you were 28. I was, what, 32? 33?
You had just turned 33.
Yeah. So we're not kids, not little,
Right.
but still, I mean, we had just met not that much earlier,
I want to say we went out in March.
and we met around December.
We met for the first time. We had started emailing in October.
So we started talking in October. We met in December. No, it was January.
It was really January.
We met in January.
And then I was gone for part of February.
So March, April.
It was
May.
really only a few weeks after we'd started kind of doing something here or there with each other.
Mm-hmm. So it was a fun trip. I remember it. I remember we ate at the House of Flavors.
I remember that.
If anyone's ever been to Luddington, House of Flavors is kind of a famous little restaurant that's there, not far from the water.
It
And
was kind of a cold and gray day.
Yeah, we wanted to go off to the beach and kind of check out Lake Michigan.
I
and all
remember there
that.
was still some snow blowing around on the
It
sand.
was cold and windy, and was it February?
It was March, I think.
March?
So we had this long trip and we talked a lot the whole time.
We did.
We were not even at a stage where we were holding hands or anything, though.
No holding hands. We
We talked the whole
barely
time.
were talking. We were definitely more talking than touching.
We were like that most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But we were looking back on it now and saying, wow, that was a lot of trust that,
So we asked ourselves the question if one of our children said, I want to go on this road trip
by myself,
by
with
myself
this guy
with
I
this
just
guy
met.
or this girl, whatever the scenario is. It's like, what would we say?
And we said, it would depend on the child and the situation.
It would depend on a lot of factors. I don't think we would give a blanket no, but
I'm not sure we'd give a blanket yes either.
I mean, there are some people, like in the courtship movements, where they basically will not allow a male and a female to be together alone ever.
No, that's just not done. But if you recall, when we first met, you were advised to go read up on courtship books because the person
You
who
said,
was
please,
advising
Ben,
you,
don't.
the person who was advising you thought that would probably be the best way for you to understand where I was coming from. And I'd kind of been immersed in reading a lot of those books for a long time. And oddly enough, I emerged from it saying, no, Ben, don't read those.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't. Because I might have said, well, that looks really good, but that's really good in theory. Is it really good in practice?
Well, and this road trip was a classic example of it. In the courtship movement of the time, it grew out of the idea that dating was probably not the best way. The way dating is done today was not the best way to find a husband or wife because the only thing that the couple would do would be to go out to fun stuff and have fun together,
Mm-hmm.
and then physical involvement was just a huge part of the whole process, and the whole thing tended to make it difficult to figure out
Mm-hmm.
if someone was actually a good person to marry. You never saw someone in a normal aspect, and the whole physical thing
Also-
really could cloud people's ability to see.
Yeah, and also if you're only doing fun things, then of course people are dating and doing fun stuff all the time.
Right, having a fun all the time.
And as soon as life gets in the way, it's like, well, wait a minute, where'd all the fun go?
Right.
Now we have bills to pay.
So that was where the courtship movement came from, and the courtship movement was heavy into parents directing, not an arranged marriage exactly, but parents directing their children in the process of finding someone to marry and overseeing every step of it, and boy and girl should never be together by themselves for any period of time.
No, Jewish culture is like that. Boys and girls are never left alone at any point.
Well, I think it used to be like that. I'm not so sure it's like that as much anymore.
I guess it depends on the culture, the group.
So, for us to go off and do this whole trip alone was basically us saying, well, we're not exactly going to follow normal dating rules, but we're not going to follow this courtship movement either.
Mm-hmm.
Is
But,
really what that meant.
but nothing happened. Hopefully I was a perfect gentleman.
You were fine. But, I think the reason that my dad felt it was fine to go is because he knew my thoughts on it to a certain extent.
And he trusted your judgment quite a bit.
Yeah, he did.
So glad I proved him right.
Well, and, when I thought it over, when my dad said it was okay, what I thought was, well, I am confident that Ben is not going to be taking a road trip so he can push an advantage over me. I knew you wouldn't do that. And I knew for anything else kind of untoward to happen, I would have to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew you wouldn't do that by yourself.
No.
And I knew that I wouldn't be involved because I wasn't going to do that.
Right. We weren't going to drive off to Las Vegas and elope.
Well, we weren't even going to do other stuff.
But from what I hear, driving off to Las Vegas, it's not so easy to elope and get married.
Hey,
So
you
we
actually
heard.
have to have a marriage license.
Yeah, I heard it's not that easy. I don't know how I hear these things. Oh, you know what? It was a story from Noel Hadley.
Yeah, he and his wife just wanted to get married.
Like in the movies. In the movies, you just drive off to Las Vegas
They
and
were
get
very
married.
young.
And they just, you just find a, Elvis impersonator and he'll marry you.
Well, we were quite a bit older than them.
Yeah. So no, that's not how our relationship started. Was not with an Elvis impersonator.
But I think in the process we were discussing what would we do with our kids, and the answer is probably something similar in that we would weigh the judgment of the people involved.
Yep.
And actually, I wonder if you can't trust them to go off and take a road trip to Luddington to deliver a bunch of parts, if maybe they aren't quite mature enough to be thinking about getting married yet either.
And hopefully we can always trust them.
Well, that's what I mean. If the question comes up, should they go do this delivery, and you can't trust them to do that because you don't know quite what they would do,
Then it's too early.
They might not be ready to be
Yeah.
thinking about getting married either.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Although I'm not sure that they have to be 28 before.
Yeah, she was 28. I was 32. 33.
That wasn't. That wasn't on purpose. It's just
No, that's just how it
how
is.
God worked the timing for us.
So many people get married young. We got married late.
Yeah, we didn't have our first baby till we were 30 and 35.
And now I am 42.
41.
Oh, 41.
You're ahead of year. Yeah, I'm now considered of advanced maternal age.
Really?
Yes, and I've had enough children that I'm not only of advanced maternal age, but unusually large number of pregnancies. High-risk pregnancy, Ben.
Yeah, this is when the doctors would start saying,
You should
you're high
stop
risk.
now.
Stop now. You're high risk, warning.
Yeah. Well, the midwife can no longer measure how many weeks we are.
So this is baby number 5.
6?
Well, yeah, this is baby number 6.
Yep, this is our 6th baby.
It's baby number 5 surviving though.
Right. But it's my 6th pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to be a family of 7. We are a family of 7.
Someone we know found out they're having twins this week. They're only like a couple weeks behind us.
And now they're a family of 8.
They had the same number of children, but they're going to jump. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be told, oh, you're having 2 instead of 1. I don't know how you'd wrap your brain around that. Used to think having twins would be a lot of fun. Now I'm like, that would be quite challenging.
Well, you change a diaper, I'd change a diaper. Just,
I'm sure we would manage it, but it would still be quite a challenge.
So that's been our exciting week and our discussions. And what we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about the Torah portion, too.
Oh, we were going to give a brief overview. The Torah portion was the blessings and cursings at the end of Leviticus.
At the end of Leviticus.
It's an abbreviated form of what's in Deuteronomy.
Yeah, one of the curses was talking about running when no one is chasing you. And our observation was, we see that today.
A lot of people scared, so scared it's as if they're constantly running. And no one's chasing them.
Run away from one thing and run into another thing and then run into another thing.
Make really bad decisions because we're running constantly in fear. The whole situation with the environment is a great example.
Yeah.
First it's global cooling in the 70s. We gotta stop everything we're doing, we're destroying the planet. And then it became global warming. Well, now we gotta stop everything we're doing because now it's too warm. Well, guess what? Now we're back to global cooling again.
It's like the sky is falling.
We're all going to starve. There's not going to be enough sunlight to grow plants. We're gonna die. And it's like, we are running when no one is chasing us. We are afraid all the time.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that's one of the things that God says. He says,
It was a curse.
yeah, he basically talks about fear. He says basically, if you fear him, then you're not going to fear the world. You're not going to fear all these things. Do not be anxious and do not fear.
And he also said, follow the ways I've laid out for you, and you will be at peace, and your land will prosper, and you will have so much food that you'll end up having to throw away food that you harvested last year just to make enough room for all the food that's going to come in this year.
What was it? 5 soldiers will chase 1,000?
Yeah, well, I don't
Something
think
like
it was that exaggerated, but it was, you will put to flight armies many times larger than yours. This will be easy for you.
Mm-hmm. And you'll always have an abundance of food.
Right.
It's interesting, food and security, that's the 2 biggest blessings.
And children.
And children. You'll be fruitful.
And you won't have miscarriages.
Mm-hmm. So that's what God considers a blessing. That's what we consider a blessing.
Live a life at peace. Have food come in when you need it.
It's funny though, because today people consider a blessed life is a life where you get everything you want. You got your big house, You've got all your bills taken care of. You've got...
But in the meantime, we're running in fear from all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Of sicknesses. We're running in fear of the earth falling apart. We're
Well, there's
running
a
in
lot
fear
of-
of our politics.
There's a lot of people who are doing very well financially, but they feel insecure. Totally insecure.
I think people are being taught to feel insecure.
Yeah. And they run from one thing to another thing.
I think part of it is to give power to people who want to take power over people. Instead of people feeling secure and independent, people who want to be in power have to make everybody feel like they have to be dependent on the person who wants to be in power. So they have to take away the feeling of security
Mm-hmm.
by whatever means necessary, so that you feel scared unless you're depending on them.
So one of the blessings is security. If you put your trust in the Lord and God, then you're not going to be scared that the enemy is going to take your house at any moment. You know, you can go to sleep with your front door unlocked and not worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you don't have to worry about famine. You don't have to worry about, you know, not having food to eat tomorrow morning. You'll always have food and clothes and...
Right. Although the running when no one's chasing you, that means there isn't actually a danger. Now, right now, if we leave front doors open and stuff,
There is a potential
there is
danger.
actually a danger. But I think what God was talking about is you actually being fearful of stuff that isn't even there. It's not
Mhm.
like it's a real danger you're afraid of. You're just always scared.
And then he talks about how it's going to be 7 times worse if you continue along with this.
Yeah, this was one of the early curses.
Yes, and then if you keep on going,
You still
eventually
rebel.
it'll be 7 times worse. It just keeps going and going. Till eventually it gets to the point where finally he says, my anger is going to be on you. And I'll make it 7 times worse. This is a theme in the Bible. It'll talk like one paragraph about the blessings and then go on for pages about the curses. It's like, okay.
I think it's because the blessings are simple. Everything will be wonderful. And then the curses are, there's grades of, I'm going to punish you this far. And if you still won't come back, I'm going to punish you this far. God doesn't say, everything will be wonderful if you follow my ways, and everything will be absolute catastrophe if you don't. He says, well, first it's going to start off by being uncomfortable, then it's going to get scary, and then it's going to get really awful, and then you're going to become a byword to all the nations, and then it's going to be so terrible that you can't even imagine how terrible it's going to be.
So contentment is very simple. It's this, and you can be content. But discontentment is going to start off mild, and then get more severe, and then get really
Right.
heavy duty, and then it's going to get catastrophic. And then before you know it, you're going to be chased off into the foreign lands and worship their gods, and it's just, you know,
Right.
dire situation.
So it seems that right now, in our country, and of course, you can't really draw an exact conclusion between what God's describing for his people and his land to us. We're not in the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting that we see signs of the curses. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we're besieged by our enemies and we're eating our own children and some of the really awful things that come later. But definitely that first set of curses is in play right now.
Blessings and curses. And it's not just for the Jewish people. It's because God has made all mankind. He expects people to live according to the instructions that he gave for us. We're his creation. You know, we were created by the Creator. The Creator knows how we should live.
Right, and beyond the expectations of whether we should live there, those expectations are just God detailing
Mm-hmm.
how he made us.
And there's also a difference between rebellion to the ways of God and just ignorance to the ways of God. Because
Yes.
there's a lot of people who are ignorant of the
That's
details but will live a generally decent life.
Because some of the things that God laid out are actually fairly self-evident as far as how you treat other people.
And when something abominable comes along, it's recognized as such and rejected.
Because all people, all mankind was made in God's image. And so
Mhm.
to a certain extent, I think we do all recognize certain types of abominations.
But when there's rebellion,
That's a whole new
it's a
ballgame.
whole new ballgame. And rebellion comes when you're convinced that either God doesn't exist or God doesn't care. You know,
Or you don't have any clue who he is.
or you don't have any idea who he is.
Right.
So that is the danger. Is eventually, yeah.
Is that your stomach
That's my
growling?
stomach. So eventually it turns into outright turning away from God, rebelling against God.
Right.
So, blessings or curses? We choose the blessings.
If you find yourself running in fear when no one is chasing you, you
We-
might need to do something different.
Now, we have been called fearful people before.
That's true. I think there's a difference between being fearful, though, and looking at situations and saying, how can we best prepare for this to happen?
Well, sometimes preparing for people who are not preparing will look like a fear reaction.
Well, would Joseph have looked fearful for storing up all that food during
During the years of plenty? Yeah.
plenty? I mean, people would say, what are
Sure.
you so afraid of?
Yeah, what are you afraid of? I mean, look at the crops are
What's with the stockpile of food?
huge. I mean, there's so much food around. Why would you be stockpiling it? We live in a land of abundance.
I think the question is simply, why would you prepare for things, and are you doing things out of an excess of fear, or are you doing things because you say, you know what, I see we have a weakness here.
Some people do prep out of fear. Total
Well,
fear.
I think fear can be a huge component to why people prepare for things.
Well, there's a healthy fear and there's an unhealthy fear. If you just fear circumstances, then no amount of prepping is going to prepare you for the circumstances.
Well, here's a good one. Turns out there appears to be both typhoid fever and bubonic plague beginning to appear out west where there's large homeless populations, like in LA and San Francisco.
Wonderful.
Now,
Bubonic plague. How do you prepare for bubonic plague?
well, you could get really scared about the sounds of that and start preparing to be, in a bunker, like with nuclear fallout.
I think the key is to understand that there is a creator who made us, and he is to be feared.
We need to follow his ways to
Follow
the best
his
of our
ways.
ability.
Right. And I think we have a misunderstanding of what fear is. You know, whenever you fear someone or something, you're giving great honor and weight to that thing. I think that's
True.
why you hear the phobias all the time. I won't mention the actual phobias, but you've all heard them. Such and such phobia, that such and such phobia.
Right, if you actually disagree with someone's philosophy or lifestyle, you are accused of having a phobia for that person. It's like,
Phobia means fear.
I am not afraid of that person. I think that what they are doing is harmful.
Right.
A big difference.
Well, they want you to fear them because
That's
it gives them
the truth.
great.
That gives them
power.
power over you.
That's, you know. So if you're of a certain class or a certain identity and you accuse someone else of being a something phobic, then you have the power.
You are essentially saying, you're so afraid of me that I have power over you.
Right.
Anyway. So
So
that was,
that
a
was
long
the
way from
that
running
was
and
the
those
tour.
chasing
Well,
you.
it's all about fear. It's all
About
about fear. So anyway, I think that concludes our tour portion, and that includes our Ben and Lauren show tonight. Our
Maybe-
exciting week.
Maybe next week will be more exciting.
Maybe not.
Let's hope not, because really boring weeks are very pleasant.
Boring weeks are wonderful.
They just don't give us anything to talk about.
What's that saying? May you live in interesting times.
That's a curse.
That's a curse. May
Yeah.
you live in interesting times.
And actually, we do. And it was very interesting times if you want to look at the politics of what happened this week. But
We want to live in boring times where there's no wars, no rumors of wars, no catastrophes.
no special prosecutors who think they can turn the rule of law around and you have to prove your innocence instead of your guilt.
No funny business in politics. Just,
Yeah,
boring.
boring. With that,
A boring life is a blessed life. May your life be boring.
there's a great conclusion.
And not fearful.
And not fearful.
Or maybe we should say it should be fearful. Fear God and keep his commandments.
Not fearful of running when no one is chasing you.
But don't run when nobody's chasing you.
The sky is not falling yet.
I heard that yet. Anyway, on that wonderful, cheerful note, we're going to say good night. Say good night, Lauren.
Good night, Lauren.
She always does that. So long.